Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at getting a drum mix up and running nice and quickly, particularly focusing on triggering. Now, it's a hot topic of debate. Some people love it, some people hate it. Some people say you shouldn't trigger, it means you can't mix properly. Well, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. The reason being, often you're working with drum mixes that aren't a very good recording. Maybe you're working from a mix where someone's recorded it at home in a less than ideal recording environment. There are all sorts of reasons why you might be working from a less than ideal starting point. So I'm here to help you get a really great sounding drum mix from any starting point. Let's get in. Now, before we dive in, please make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel, and hit the bell so you know when the future videos are coming out. If you're looking to buy any new equipment for your studio setup, please use my affiliate link up there or there and down the description. It doesn't cost you anything extra, just means a bit gets kicked back to me. And of course, you can sign up to my Patreon as well. Again, link is down in the description. Now, let's look at this drum mix. Here's the starting point that I've got. Okay, it's balanced, it's fine, I can hear everything, but it doesn't sound very nice. Here is where I'm going to get you to. Now, as I said, I'm going to have a focus on triggering in this video, okay? It's a divisive topic, some people love it, some people hate it. The reason that it's disliked so often is, generally speaking, because it's done poorly. Okay, so what I hope to do in this video is to give you some tips and tricks, some loose rules to go by that will help you do it well and keep it sounding natural and therefore stop people from complaining about it. Now, there's going to be a really strong focus in this video on gain staging correctly throughout the process. So making sure that the input and output signals on every plugin is the same. What this allows you to do is at any point to A/B a plugin, turn it in and out, in order to hear what it's doing in the signal chain. So it's really, really vital. To help us do that, therefore, we're going to make sure that we've got our pre-fader metering engaged. In Logic Pro, it's this little button here. Remember, it puts the meter before the fader rather than it being post-fader, which is the default. If you haven't seen my previous video on the importance of that and how to do it, then it's linked up somewhere and also down in the description below. Go check that one out. So what that means is that the meter is showing the signal coming through our plugins, but isn't affected by the level of the fader, which is really important in terms of helping us ensure that our gain structure is sustained throughout all of our plugins, regardless of the actual level that we set on the fader, which is simply just how much of what is on that channel we're hearing. Let's start by processing our snare channels, okay? Let's grab a little loop here. I'm going to solo out the snare top. This is what we're working with to begin with. Not a particularly inspiring sound, not a great recording. Got loads of cymbal bleed in there, which isn't very helpful. Nonetheless, we're going to process that snare sound on its own initially before doing anything in the triggering domain. So I'm going to use one channel strip. I quite like using channel strips like this because it gives me all of the kind of functionality that I'm going to want to grab straight away all in one plugin. So this is SSL's channel strip 2. You can use any channel strip that you like. You can use an SSL channel strip. You could use a Neve channel strip if you like. You could use your DAW stock channel strip. But I like this one because of how it's kind of laid out and how easy it is to get around. So a couple of things to draw your attention to first of all. I'm doing the EQing before I'm doing the dynamics processing, okay? On any SSL plugin, you should be able to swap those things around, either EQ before dynamics or dynamics before EQ. In all the instances where I'm using an SSL here, I've got the EQ before the dynamics. So make sure that you know how to figure that out on your SSL plugin and have that set up. Now, on snare drum, there are some key frequencies that pretty much work all the time, okay? So those frequencies are about 8K, about 2.5K, sort of 600 to 900 hertz, and then 200 hertz. So I'm doing 3 boosts and a cut on this snare drum. So let's talk you through these moves. The first move that I'm making is this 8K boost, quite a big boost, 8 dB. Now this, you'll want to push kind of as much as you can, but it's going to give you a lot of cymbals and stuff as well. So if you've got a lot of cymbal bleed, as I have in this performance, it's going to be difficult to kind of push it too much. But let's take it out and bring it back in so that you can hear. Giving me a little bit of kind of crack at the top of the snare. To counterbalance that, I've then got this 200 hertz section here that I'm going to put a boost into, and that's going to give me some weight back in the bottom of my snare. Okay, so those two things kind of balance each other out. Put that EQ in and out. And both those bands are set to the bell curve options, where by default, they're both shelving EQs on this plugin at least. I've got them set to the bell curves. Then I'm going to boost again at 2.5 here. Again, as much as I can get away with without the cymbals becoming an issue. And I'm going to broaden the Q on that boost there to about a 1Q. Nice, and then to get rid of a bit of the boxiness, I'm going to cut somewhere between 600 and 900. So I'll boost, sweep around to find the frequency that I don't like, and then cut it out. So let's hear that whole EQ in and out. Okay, making a big difference. Still doesn't sound particularly lovely because it's not a good recording, but it's better than it was. Over on the dynamic side, I'm using the compressor here with the slow attack setting, so I haven't got the fast attack engaged. It's on the peak algorithm rather than looking at RMS. 3:1 ratio, fastest release, and I'm grabbing around 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. Then I can try and gate out some of that kind of nasty cymbal stuff. It's not going to be very easy, but I can at least do a little bit. So taking a little bit out, just at a really slow release so I don't get any kind of weird pumping. I want to check my gain structure in and out to make sure that I'm gain compensating everything. So without that plugin, I'm peaking at 12.8. I want to match that with my output level here. There we go, so in and out. Okay, bit better. Over on the snare bottom, very similar process. Okay, very similar process. I'm boosting in the same places. So 8K, 2.5K, 200. Cutting the same place. The only difference is here I've got the fast attack setting on the compressor. So it's going to be grabbing the transient here and looking to just sustain the sound rather than letting the transient through for a bit of the punch. That's the only difference. Let's bring that in here. Okay, so both those channels together, I've then got them bussed coming to my snare bus here. So this is both channels together. And if we hear those things in and out of the mix, okay, starting to get a slightly more usable snare sound. It's still not lovely, but here's where the magic happens, okay? I'm going to use a trigger plugin. Now I'm using Stephen Slate's Trigger 2. You can use whatever trigger plugin you like, whatever you've got or whatever you fancy. The principles, the concepts are always exactly the same, okay? Always exactly the same. It just depends on the plugin that you've got as to how you find the functionality. Let's listen to this plugin in and out. Let's see what it's doing. Okay, making a massive difference, sure, but we'll go through some key principles here that'll explain how, even though it sounds very different, it still sounds pretty natural. So let's start this process again. I'm in fact going to load up a new instance of Trigger 2. I'm going to bypass my original one. So here's my setup one over on the right. Here's my new one. Now, the first important thing to note is I haven't compressed the snare drum aggressively yet. If you compress the snare drum aggressively, or any drum for that matter, if you compress aggressively before you trigger, you already have a drum that's got a really narrow dynamic range that then hits your trigger and therefore gives you really unnatural triggering because it's triggering samples within a very limited dynamic range, which makes every hit sound the same. That sounds unnatural. So thing number one is to not compress aggressively before you do any triggering. That's really important. That means that the input signal coming into your trigger still has range, dynamic range, and therefore it's triggering a range of different samples. Now on this particular plugin, I can choose from all sorts of different snare samples. So I know that the one that I like for this particular track is from this Paramore kit. So I'm going to load up that snare sample there. Now you'll see that as it plays, the waveform is visible in this reader here. Now what we want to do is adjust the detail here so that it is in the right range to be triggered by the incoming waveform. What I can also do is adjust the input signal to make the incoming waveform a little larger, which is going to help a little bit as well. Now in this particular plugin, it's actually got a whole range of different samples set up. So it's not just triggering one sound, it's triggering 6 different sounds. So I could go in and adjust the balance and the blend of these different things if I wanted to. So that's the main sound. It's got a room sound, another room sound, another snare hit, and room tones for that as well. So you can adjust and mix those things to make a nice blend of your own. Absolutely, that's great. The thing that's really important here is if you've got any faster snare passages. So for example, let's find maybe this bit here. You've got an option here, which is the retrigger option, which allows you to adjust how quickly it'll be. This plugin will allow the retriggering to happen. So, for example, if it's missing flams, or if it's retriggering too quickly, if it's glitching, you can adjust the retrigger speed and the sensitivity to compensate for those things. So you see over here, I've actually adjusted to 17 milliseconds. So let's just match that. Now, the really important thing is this mix knob. At the moment, I'm at 100%, which means I've got 100% of the trigger. As I back this off, I'll get the original sound coming back through. So it's up to me to decide what my sweet spot is. So there, I've got the original sound still there, and I've got the trigger. That's really, really important, okay? Because it means that I'm still keeping some of the natural sound in there. I'm not completely getting rid of the original sound, but I'm supplementing it. I'm supporting the not very nice original recording with a much nicer sounding trigger. Then I can use the gate within the trigger to cut out some of the bleed. Or in this case, all of it. This gate is really, really good. Check this out. I can adjust the release to make it a little longer, make it a little more natural. What a difference. What a world of difference. And then, absolutely, I need to gain compensate. So adjust the input and output signals, which, according to what I've done over here, is very, very similar. So let's hear that in and out. Now, the crucial thing is it doesn't get any louder. I've made sure that my gain staging is absolutely on point. So the input and output signal of that trigger plugin are identical. It's not getting any louder. It's just becoming a better sound. It's more controlled because it's gated. And there's one other really key thing that we want to check. And that is that the actual pitch of these samples is the same. Okay. Let me get rid of my new instance here. Now, the way that we do that is to listen for the fundamental frequency, the fundamental tone of the drum. So I've got Pro Q3 here. You can use any plugin that's got a frequency analyzer, a spectrum analyzer. I really like the way this one works for the reason that you'll see just now. So I'm going to play this sample and I'm going to look for the fundamental frequency, the lowest frequency that's present, which is the tone of the drum. So you can see it's down here. And in Pro Q3, if I hover, it's going to kind of save the waveform, which is really useful. So we can see it's around this sort of G sharp to A kind of territory, okay? Now, if I put my trigger in and listen to that, we can see it's slightly lower. It's at G3. So what I want to do is go in to my plugin and then I can tune the sample that's there to bring the pitch up. So I can actually tune that drum to make the pitches the same. And now I'm at G3. So now the pitches of the sample and the original are the same. And that might be the most important thing in making your trigger sound natural. The reason being that even if you're not using much of the original snare sound, in this case, we've got 40% of it with the adjustment we made in the trigger plugin, that snare sound, the tone of it, is still in the overheads, it's in the room mics, it's bleeding in the other microphones. So if the pitch isn't the same, it's going to sound weird because you're going to have two different snare tones, if you like. You'll have the original pitch, which was at, what did we say, G sharp, and then the trigger, which was at G. So by tuning the trigger to match the original pitch, we're able to ensure that they gel together and it sounds like it belongs to that drum kit. That is so, so important. So let's bring that trigger back in. I can get rid of that plugin now. After that, I've got some EQ, so I'm then EQing that snare drum. Have a listen to that. Okay, just cutting out some boxiness, giving it a little bit more snap. And then I'm compressing. I've got this 1176 compressor, which I'm not hitting too hard. I'm not looking to smack the hell out of it. I've got a relatively slow attack for an 1176. I'm at 4:1 ratio, slow release. But importantly, I'm blending the mix. So I'm at about 50% mix here. So it's in parallel. And it's giving me a bit of sustain out of that drum. Let's hear those three things in and out of the mix. In. And you hear how, because the tone of the drum, the pitch of the drum is matched, it sounds like it belongs. I cannot emphasize that enough. Cool. So those are all the basic principles. And then we do basically exactly the same on the other drum parts. So if we look at what we're doing in our kick here, same principles, slightly different frequency points. So on the kick, I'm high pass filtering up to about 37. I'm boosting again at 8K. I'm boosting this time at 4.5K. I'm cutting again somewhere between that 6 to 900. So I'm cutting at 700 here. And then I'm boosting at 50, so a bit lower. I've got actually the shelving EQ here on that high band on the 8K rather than the bell. Again, compressing 3:1, slow attack, fast release, same things, okay? So let's bring that SSL plugin in. Sounds nasty. Okay, making a massive difference that. On this kick, I'm actually then putting a bit of tape just to thicken it up and just kind of warm it up a bit, and a bit of tape saturation, which will control some of the transients. Again, everything is always gain matched. Input and output signal of every plugin is identical all the way through. So my gain structure is the same all the way through. Trigger 2, exactly the same principles. Okay, I've tuned the drum again. I've matched the input and out signal. I'm blending with the wet dry. I'm gating, exactly the same principles. The drum is tuned so it's at the same pitch, so it will sound like it belongs in that kit. Let's hear those things in and out of the mix. Here's out. Doesn't sound out of place, doesn't sound like it's horribly triggered, doesn't sound like it's a kick drum that's taken from another kit and chucked on here. It sounds like it's part of that drum kit. Then EQing, so I'm scooping loads of low mids and mid range and then gain compensating. Tightening up that kick sound a lot. And then again, compressing 1176. This time not in parallel, just straight in and out. Again, slower attack, fast release, 2:1, so really gentle this time. You can see the gain reduction is modest, up to sort of 3 dB, so I'm just looking to tidy up some of those more pokey transient peaks. So let's hear those kick and snare moves out and then in the mix. Just the SSL. Already a massive difference there. With the triggering. with EQ and compression. So there we go. Really natural sounding kick and snare triggers. The key thing is, one, getting your original sources sounding as good as you can beforehand. Two, gain compensating. Three, matching your input and output signal. And four, tuning the trigger to match the original pitch that you have on the kit. If you follow those four principles, you'll be in a good place. Let's look at the toms. So let's find a section where I've got some toms. What about... So the toms aren't sounding great. And this is what they're going to sound like after. So let's just solo out this rack tom here. Now you can EQ a tom in 4 moves, very, very simply. First move is to boost the fundamental. Second move is to boost the stick attack. Third move is to cut stuff in the middle. Fourth move is to high pass. That's it. So let's do those 4 things. First, we're going to boost the fundamental. Then we're going to boost the stick attack. So I'm looking for the highest kind of peak up in this area up here. I'm going to cut everything in between. And high pass up to the fundamental. And that's it. EQ a tom in 4 moves. Compared to the original EQ that I've got, pretty similar. Pretty similar. And if we check on our other tom as well, pretty similar. 4 moves. Boost the fundamental, cut in between, boost the stick attack, cut the low end rumble. Let's hear those in and out. Take this little fill here. Cool. Now again, I'm triggering those 2 drums. Exactly the same principles apply, okay? Exactly the same. So I'm adjusting my samples, I'm using the gate, I'm adjusting my input sensitivity, I'm blending the wet dry, so I'm using more of the original here than the sample, gain compensating. It looks like I didn't need to tune this drum at all, whereas this one, I've tuned it a long way. Okay, so let's listen to that top trigger just on its own. You can hear they're the same pitch, which is why I haven't had to tune it. And you hear it's a bit ringy, so I gated this one. So I'm just cutting out some of the sustain here. On this low tom, you see I've tuned it a long way. So let's hear this in and out. Just solo the low tom. So you can see how far I've tuned that. So if I go back to the original tuning, much higher. And you hear how there, when you've got it blended and you can hear the original and the trigger, it sounds weird. I can hear the 2 tones. Whereas when I put in my tuning, let's just type in how much I tuned it. That's the original. Trigger in. It's the same pitch, it's the right pitch. That's why it's so important. Then I'm compressing those things together on the tom bus. And that's it. That's drum triggering in a nutshell. That's how you do it to make it sound natural. Now, a couple of other things that I've got going on this kit. I'm just doing some EQing on the overheads and rooms. So let's bring those things into our mix as well. Here's out, in, and then last couple of bits of magic sauce. I'm doing some parallel compression. Okay, so I'm slamming the kick, snare, and toms pretty hard through a parallel compressor. It's an SSL-G compressor, and then I'm blending it underneath. So let's bring those things in. So that's giving me some sustain, some length. And then on my whole drum kit, I'm then compressing everything together. So I've got a distressor style plugin. I've got a slow attack, a fast release. So I'm still letting the transients through to enhance the punch. 4:1 ratio. Again, blending wet dry. Let's bring that in. And it sounds like it gets wildly louder, but it doesn't. It actually doesn't. If we have this bypassed, let's check out our peak level. (7.1). Okay, so I'm 0.4 dB over. Let's pull that back, 0.4 dB. You know, and that's our drum kit sound. Not anything wildly complicated or difficult, just some basic principles. Here it is, everything out. And in. Now the vital thing here is I haven't made any drum kit element any louder. Nothing is louder because I've ensured that I'm checking my gain staging in and out of every single plugin. So everything that's coming out is the same as what's coming in. That's so key. It gives you control. It means that you're able to manage your mix really nice and easily, and means that at the end you end up with a great kit sound that you can hear everything, that it's tight, it's punchy, but it hasn't got away from you. It's not out of control. So that is how you use triggers to make your kit sound natural and nice. Quick recap on the fundamental principles. Make your drum sound as nice as you can before the sound comes in. Make sure you blend it with the wet dry so you're not just using all of the triggered sound. Make sure you're matching the input and output level so that the signal coming out is the same level as the signal coming in, and tune those drums to match the original pitch of the sound that you have on the recording. That's going to make it sound like it belongs to that drum kit. I hope this has been really useful to you. Please make sure you give us a thumbs up, a subscribe, hit the bell, all those things, and I'll be back for another one for you very, very soon. See you soon.